The discovery. In the vastness of space, tranquility had been the norm for millennia. The collective, an alliance of 17 sentient species, had established order across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their civilization was built on harmony, predictability, and the steady progression of carefully managed evolution. For over 12,000 cycles, the Vespar, as the founding species of the collective, had guided this peaceful expansion, until they found Earth. Admiral Zenthar stood on the observation deck of the Vespar flagship Eternal Harmony, his 4 compound eyes fixed on the holographic display of the blue-green planet. His exoskeleton clicked softly as he shifted his weight, antenna twitching with agitation. "Confirm the readings," he ordered, his voice a melodic series of clicks that the ship's translator converted to the common language. Science Officer Mila approached, her steps deliberate and measured. "Confirmed, Admiral. The species calls themselves humans. They possess primitive interplanetary capabilities, but have yet to develop true faster-than-light travel." "And the anomaly readings?" Mila's antenna drooped slightly, the Vespar equivalent of a grimace. "Unprecedented. Their neural patterns exhibit chaotic bursts that our algorithms cannot predict. They experience extreme emotional swings that would drive any rational species to madness." Classification. The Council has designated them as Category Omega, universal nightmares. The designation hung in the air like a physical presence. In 12,000 cycles, no species had ever been classified as Category Omega. The very concept existed only as a theoretical worst-case scenario. "They're dangerous, then?" Zenthar asked, though he already knew the answer. "Beyond dangerous, Admiral. They're unpredictable. The simulations suggest they could destabilize the entire collective in under 200 cycles if allowed to expand beyond their solar system." Zenthar's mandibles clicked in the Vespar expression of grim determination. "Then the path is clear. We must contain them." Captain Maya Rise of the Earth Defense Force had seen some strange things during her 15 years of service, but nothing compared to the massive vessel that had appeared at the edge of the lunar orbit. It was shaped like an elongated teardrop, with a surface that seemed to shimmer with colors that hurt her eyes when she tried to focus on them. "Any response to our hails?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady for the sake of her crew. Communications Officer Lyon shook his head. "Nothing, Captain. But we're detecting massive energy readings. I think they're scanning us." Maya studied the tactical display. The vessel was at least 3 kilometers long, dwarfing anything humanity had ever constructed. Earth's combined defense fleet would be like mosquitoes attacking an elephant. "Maintain defensive posture but do not initiate hostile action," she ordered. "Continue broadcasting welcome messages on all frequencies." The bridge fell silent as everyone watched the alien vessel. For 3 days, it had simply sat there, observing. Earth's governments had been thrown into chaos. Religious leaders proclaimed everything from salvation to apocalypse. The markets had crashed, then stabilized, then soared as people realized the technological windfall first contact might bring. Maya had a different feeling. Something about the ship's positioning. Just outside effective weapons range, but close enough to strike in seconds, struck her as tactical. Not the approach of peaceful explorers, but the caution of hunters studying dangerous prey. The silence was shattered by a blaring alarm. "Energy spike," shouted Tactical Officer Kepler. "There." The rest of his words were lost as a beam of blue-white light enveloped the defense vessel. Maya expected destruction, but instead, every system on the ship simultaneously shut down. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the bridge in an eerie red glow. "Status report," she called out. "All systems disabled." Liang responded, frantically working his console. "Life support is on emergency backup. Weapons, engines, communications, everything else is dead." Through the viewport, Maya could see the other ships in the defense fleet drifting powerlessly. Not destroyed, disabled, with clinical precision. "They could have destroyed us," she murmured. "Captain," Kepler said, his voice uncharacteristically small, "we're being boarded." Admiral Zenthar reviewed the containment operation reports with satisfaction. Phase 1 had been executed flawlessly. The primitive human defense vessels had been neutralized without destruction. No need to trigger their survival instincts unnecessarily. The containment field was now being established around their planet, a barrier that would prevent any form of matter or energy from escaping the solar system. "The field will be stable within 6 rotations," Science Officer Mila reported. "The humans are attempting to reactivate their vessels, but the neural disruptors have rendered their technology temporarily inert." And the infiltration teams. "Sample collection is proceeding as planned. We've gathered biological specimens from major population centers and have begun mapping their social structures." Zenthar nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Once we understand them, we can begin the pacification process." A junior officer approached, antennae rigid with urgency. "Admiral, we have a situation in Sector 7. Explain." "One of the human vessels has reactivated its systems. It's launched what appears to be a primitive nuclear weapon toward our containment generator." Zenthar's compound eyes narrowed. "Impossible. The neural disruptors should have rendered their technology inoperable for at least 3 rotations. It appears they've bypassed the disruptor effect using some form of analog technology. Mechanical systems with no electronic components." For the first time in his long career, Zenthar felt something akin to unease. The simulations had indicated a 99.8% probability that humans would be paralyzed with fear and confusion for at least 6 rotations after first contact. "Intercept the weapon," he ordered. "Already done, Admiral. But there's more. We're detecting multiple smaller vessels launching from Earth's surface. They're using chemical propulsion only, no electronic signatures at all." Zenthar's mandibles clicked rapidly. "They're adapting. Far faster than predicted." Dr. Eleanor Wright had never expected to find herself in a military bunker 2 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by generals and government officials. As one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, she had dreamed of first contact, but not like this. "The EMP-like effect they used knocks out anything with a circuit board or computer chip," she explained, pointing to the diagram on the wall. "But they didn't account for our technological diversity." General Williams nodded grimly. "Cold War-era technology, vacuum tubes, mechanical systems, analog equipment. We've been pulling everything we can out of museums and military storage." "Exactly," Eleanor said. "What might seem primitive to them is actually our advantage. They expected a homogeneous response. They're not prepared for our adaptability." The president leaned forward. "What have we learned about them?" Eleanor pulled up the limited data they had gathered. "They call themselves the Vespar. From what we can tell, they're part of something called the Collective. Their biology is insectoid, with a hive-like social structure. Their technology is far beyond ours, but it seems to follow extremely predictable patterns. Weaknesses: they value order and predictability above all else. And right now, we're being unpredictable." Williams pointed to the tactical display. The counterattack using the retrofitted Cold War bombers managed to damage one of their installations on the moon. "They've pulled back to regroup." "They're reassessing," Eleanor said. "We confused them. Their initial containment strategy assumed we'd be paralyzed by fear or awe." "So what's their next move?" Eleanor looked grim. "If they follow typical insectoid strategic patterns, they'll escalate to ensure dominance. Not necessarily to destroy us. They could have done that already, but to force compliance." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "There's something else," Eleanor added. "From the communications we've intercepted and partially translated, they're calling us nightmares. Something about our neural patterns terrifies them." The president's eyes narrowed. "Then perhaps it's time we show them what nightmares can do." Admiral Zenthar faced the Collective Council's holographic projections, their various alien forms shimmering around the command chamber. The humans have damaged 3 containment generators, he reported. Their response has been unexpected. Explain this failure, demanded Counselor Vrax of the Thandarin, his serpentine form coiling with agitation. They adapted using technological regression, Zenthar replied. When we disabled their advanced systems, they reverted to primitive technologies our disruptors couldn't affect. This confirms our worst fears, said Counselor Ilara, her gaseous form swirling. Their unpredictability index is even higher than the simulation suggested. More concerning, Mila added, stepping forward, is their response pattern. Most species react to superior force with either submission or panic. The humans are exhibiting coordinated resistance combined with technological innovation under pressure. The nightmare classification was appropriate. Vrax hissed. They must be contained at all costs. Zenthar hesitated before his next report. There's more. We've detected unusual radiation signatures from their planet. They appear to be activating thousands of dormant nuclear weapons. They would destroy their own world. Ilara's gaseous form pulsed with alarm. No, Zenthar replied. I believe it's a message. They're showing us they prefer mutual destruction to submission. The council chamber erupted in alarmed communications, a cacophony of clicks, hisses, and electromagnetic pulses. Escalate the containment protocols. Vrax finally ordered. Deploy the gravity manipulators. If they won't be contained, their planet's crust will be stabilized to prevent all tectonic activity and volcanic processes. Without these energy sources, their civilization will regress to a manageable state. Zenthar's antennae drooped slightly, a subtle gesture of doubt that went unnoticed by the council. The simulation models had never accounted for a species that could adapt so quickly or one willing to face extinction rather than submission. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Zenthar wondered if the collective had encountered something truly beyond its understanding, a species that didn't just bend the rules of predictable behavior, but shattered them completely. What troubled him most wasn't the humans' primitive technology or their reckless courage. It was the question that now haunted his thoughts. What happens when nightmares fight back? The reckoning. The gravity manipulators deployed by the Vespar were technological marvels, massive constructs that could dampen the natural energy flows of an entire planet. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere like metallic jellyfish, their tendrils extending to pierce the crust, humanity watched and waited. Admiral Zenthar observed the deployment from the Eternal Harmony's command deck. The strategy was sound. Without tectonic activity, the humans' energy resources would dwindle. Their civilization would slowly, peacefully regress to a pre-industrial state, becoming manageable. Containment without destruction. The collective's preferred approach. Gravity manipulators have reached optimal depth, reported Tactical Officer Vreen. Energy dampening will commence in 3 pulses. Zenthar's mandibles clicked in approval. Proceed. The first pulse was dispatched, a ripple of gravitational force designed to stabilize Earth's tectonic plates permanently. Sensors tracked its progress as it spread across the planet's surface. And then something impossible happened. Admiral. Vreen's antennae shot upright in alarm. The pulse, it's being reflected. Explain, demanded Zenthar, moving to the tactical display. The humans have deployed some form of counter-resonance field. They're using our own gravitational wave against us, amplifying and redirecting it. Before Zenthar could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Warning signals blared throughout the command deck as the redirected pulse struck the Vespar fleet with twice its original force. Damage report. 3 support vessels have lost stabilization. Mila reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. Our primary drive is experiencing 15% efficiency reduction. Zenthar's compound eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. How? How could they possibly develop counter-resonance technology so quickly? Unknown, Admiral. But we're detecting unusual energy signatures from their polar regions. They appear to have created a global network using their planet's magnetic field as a carrier wave. For the first time in his centuries of service, Admiral Zenthar felt something unfamiliar ripple through his exoskeleton. Doubt. Dr. Eleanor Wright stood in the control room of Project Aegis, surrounded by a peculiar mix of cutting-edge technology and retrofitted Cold War equipment. The Global Magnetic Resonance Network had been her brainchild, a desperate gamble based on theoretical physics and the limited data they'd gathered about Vespar technology. It worked, she whispered, watching the displays as the alien gravity pulse dissipated. Around her, the international team of scientists and engineers erupted in celebration. General Williams approached, his weathered face showing rare approval. "Congratulations, Doctor. You just bought us time." Eleanor shook her head. "Not enough. They'll analyze what happened and adapt their approach. We need to take the initiative. The civilian evacuation to the deep bunker networks is proceeding, but it will take weeks to get even a fraction of the population underground," Williams said grimly. "What's our next move?" Eleanor turned to the massive global display. Red dots indicated the locations of Vespar gravity manipulators embedded in Earth's crust. "We've learned that their technology requires perfect symmetry and balance. It's why they deployed the manipulators in a precise geometric pattern. So we disrupt the pattern." "Exactly. But not by destroying the manipulators. They'll just deploy more. Instead, we add our own elements to the equation." She pulled up a different display showing thousands of small devices being manufactured in factories across the globe. "We're calling them chaos nodes. They don't attack the alien technology directly. They introduce tiny, unpredictable variables into the system." Williams studied the design. "These look like they're based on old analog randomizers." "They are. We're fighting mathematical perfection with deliberate imperfection. Quantum uncertainties and true randomness. Things their highly ordered minds struggle to process." "Will it be enough?" Eleanor's expression was grim. "To win? No, but enough to convince them that containing us will cost more than they're willing to pay." The Collective Council had convened an emergency session, their holographic forms gathered in the sacred decision sphere aboard the Eternal Harmony. Representatives of all 17 member species were present, an unprecedented assembly for what was supposed to be a routine containment operation. "The humans have deployed countermeasures against our gravity manipulation technology," Admiral Zenthar reported. "Not only did they reflect our initial pulse, but they have now introduced what our analysts are calling chaos nodes throughout their geosphere." "Explain these nodes," demanded Counselor Vrax. Science Officer Mila stepped forward. "They are devices that generate true quantum randomness, creating unpredictable fluctuations in our carefully calibrated systems. They're forcing our technology to constantly recalibrate, draining our resources." "How is this possible?" asked Ilara, her gaseous form swirling with agitation. "Their technological level should not permit such countermeasures." "That is the most disturbing aspect," Zenthar replied. "They're not using advanced technology. They're using primitive systems in innovative ways. Their approach is asymmetrical." The council chamber filled with the discordant sounds of multiple species communicating their distress. "Have we underestimated them?" asked Councillor Corvin of the crystalline lith. "Yes," Mila said simply. "Our initial classification was based on their chaotic neural patterns, but we failed to recognize that this same chaos makes them extraordinarily adaptable. Where we see disorder, they see possibility." "The containment strategy has failed," Zenthar concluded. "I recommend we withdraw and reassess." "Unacceptable," Vrax hissed. "No species has ever resisted the collective. The precedent would be dangerous." "I agree," said Ilara. "We must escalate to full biological suppression." Zenthar's antennae stiffened in alarm. "Counselors, biological suppression has not been employed in 9,000 cycles. The ethical protocols are suspended in cases of Category Omega threats." Vrax interrupted. "The vote will now proceed." Zenthar watched as the council members signaled their decisions. The outcome was clear before the final tally: 14 in favor of biological suppression, 3 against. Admiral Zenthar, Vrax announced, "You are hereby ordered to deploy neurosuppressant clouds in the human atmosphere. Their cognitive functions will be reduced to basic survival instincts. The threat will be neutralized without destruction." Zenthar's mandibles clicked in the formal acknowledgement required by protocol, even as something unfamiliar stirred within him. A sensation the ordered Vespar mind rarely experienced: moral conflict. The Vespar deployment ships were unlike anything humanity had seen before, organic-looking vessels that reminded Eleanor of giant sea pods. They positioned themselves in Earth's upper atmosphere, preparing to release the neurosuppressant clouds that would effectively lobotomize the entire human race. "Time to impact?" asked the President. Her voice steadied despite the weight of the moment. 30 minutes, Eleanor replied, studying the readings from the high-altitude sensors. "Once they release the agent, we'll have perhaps 2 hours before global cognitive degradation begins." Around the emergency command center, the faces of world leaders and military commanders showed grim determination. The evacuation to the deep bunkers had managed to secure only 12% of the global population. The rest would be exposed. "Are we certain the countermeasure will work?" asked the Chinese premier through his translator. Eleanor exchanged glances with Dr. Abasi, the Nigerian biochemist who had led the countermeasure development. "As certain as we can be," Abasi replied. "The atmospheric dispersal system is ready, but there's a cost." "Explain," the president said. "The neurological shield we've developed will protect against the suppressant, but it contains elements that will permanently alter human brain chemistry." "Nothing dangerous," he quickly added, "but we will change." The president's eyes narrowed. "Change how?" "Enhanced neural plasticity, accelerated thought processes, potentially new cognitive capabilities we can't fully predict." Eleanor stepped forward. "We're essentially forcing our own rapid evolution as a defensive measure. We'll still be human, but different." Silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. "Do we have any other options?" asked the Russian president. "None that can be implemented in the time we have," Eleanor said quietly. The President of the United States stood, looking at each of the world leaders in turn. "Then we're agreed? We change, or we surrender our humanity entirely to these invaders." One by one, they nodded their assent. "Launch the countermeasure," the President ordered. Admiral Zenthar watched the deployment monitors with growing unease. The neurosuppressant pods had entered Earth's atmosphere, dispersing their contents as designed. But the humans had responded immediately, launching thousands of their own atmospheric delivery systems. "Analysis of the human chemical agent," he asked. Mila studied the incoming data. "It appears to be a neurological shield, Admiral. They're attempting to counter our suppressant." "Probability of success?" Mila's antennae drooped slightly. "Unknown. Their approach is unprecedented. They're not just blocking our agent. They're using it as a catalyst for their own neurological enhancement. They're weaponizing our attack to evolve themselves," Zenthar said, a note of what might have been admiration in his clicking voice. "Yes, Admiral. And our sensors are detecting a new pattern in their communications, faster, more complex. Their cognitive capabilities appear to be expanding." An alert sounded, drawing their attention to the primary display. A single human vessel was approaching the Eternal Harmony, small, seemingly unarmed, broadcasting on all frequencies. "They're requesting direct communication," Vreen reported. "With you specifically, Admiral." Zenthar's compound eyes focused on the image of the tiny ship against the vastness of space. A decision crystallized in his mind, one that went against everything the ordered Vespar consciousness valued. "Open a channel," he ordered. Captain Maya Reyes guided the diplomatic vessel toward the massive Vespar flagship, her enhanced mind processing multiple scenarios simultaneously. The neurological changes had affected everyone differently, but all humans now experienced a new clarity of thought, a heightened awareness that made their previous mental state seem like viewing the world through fog. "We're being scanned," reported Kepler, his fingers dancing across the controls with newfound precision. "They've authorized approach," Liang added, receiving docking instructions. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. She had been chosen not just for her military experience, but for what the new cognitive assessments had revealed. An unusually high empathy index combined with strategic thinking. Traits that might help bridge the gap between such fundamentally different species. "Remember," Dr. Eleanor Wright said from her position at the science station, "their society values order above all else. We need to present our unpredictability as an asset, not a threat." As the ship docked with the Vespar flagship, Maya took a deep breath. "Let's go introduce ourselves properly this time." The Vespar greeting party was a sight that would have terrified pre-enhancement humans, 7-foot insectoid beings with gleaming exoskeletons and compound eyes that reflected the light in prismatic patterns. But Maya found herself noticing other details, the careful spacing between the aliens, the rhythmic motion of their antennae, the mathematical precision in their movements. They were led to a chamber unlike anything human architecture could conceive, a perfect hemisphere where sound and light seemed to follow different rules. At its center stood a Vespar with ornate markings on its exoskeleton. "Admiral Zenthar," Maya said, offering a formal bow. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." The Admiral's mandibles moved, and a translation device converted his clicks and chirps. "Captain Reyes, you have fought impressively for a species we expected to submit quickly." "We don't submit," Maya replied, "but we can cooperate." Eleanor stepped forward. "Admiral, we've analyzed your actions and believe we understand your concerns. You classified us as Category Omega, universal nightmares, because our neural patterns appear chaotic and unpredictable to your sensory systems." Zenthar's antennae twitched in what they had learned was surprise. "You understand our classification system." "We've been busy," Eleanor said with a small smile. "Your suppression attempt gave us access to chemical markers that helped us decode aspects of your biochemistry, which in turn provided insights into your thought patterns." "Then you understand why you were contained," Zenthar replied. "Your species generates neural patterns so chaotic they disrupt the harmony fields that bind the collective consciousness. You are, quite literally, walking nightmares to our sensory systems." Maya exchanged glances with Eleanor. "We suspected something like that. But Admiral, what you see is chaos. We call creativity. Innovation. The ability to make intuitive leaps that ordered thinking cannot. Your recent neurological self-modification has only intensified these patterns," Zenthar noted. "You have made yourselves more of what frightens us." "Yes," Maya acknowledged, "but we've also gained better control and understanding." Eleanor activated a holographic display showing a complex neural network. "This is a model of the interface we've developed. It would allow our minds to communicate with yours without causing sensory disruption. A translator for consciousness, not just language." Admiral Zenthar studied the display, his compound eyes reflecting the shifting patterns. "You created this in the time since our first contact." "As I said," Maya smiled, "we've been busy." "The collective has existed for 12,000 cycles," Zenthar said after a moment. "In that time, we have encountered 16 other sentient species. All followed predictable patterns of development. All could be integrated into our harmonic society. And then you found us," Maya said. "Yes, the unpredictable element. The nightmares that could not be contained." Zenthar's mandibles clicked in what they now recognized as thoughtfulness. "Yet here you stand, offering harmony instead of chaos." "Not instead of," Eleanor corrected gently. "Alongside. Our chaos is what drives us forward. It's what helped us survive your containment efforts. But chaos can coexist with order. In fact, the most complex systems in nature require both." Zenthar was silent for a long moment, his alien mind processing concepts that challenged the very foundation of Vespar society. Finally, he spoke. "The Collective Council has ordered your species suppressed, but I find myself questioning something unprecedented for my kind. He turned to face them directly. Humanity represents something we have never encountered. A sentient paradox. You terrify us, yet you may also be exactly what the collective needs after 12,000 cycles of stagnant harmony. What are you suggesting, Admiral? Maya asked. A new approach, not containment, not suppression, but careful integration. A protected status for humanity as you develop, with controlled cultural exchange. His antennae quivered. It will be challenging for both our peoples. Eleanor smiled. The most meaningful relationships usually are. There will be resistance within the collective, Zenthar warned. Many will still view you as nightmares to be contained. Maya stepped forward, meeting the alien's compound gaze without flinching. Then perhaps it's time for the universe to learn that not all nightmares are to be feared. Sometimes, they're just dreams that challenge the boundaries of what's possible. Zenthar's mandibles clicked in what might have been the Vespar equivalent of a smile. An intriguing perspective, Captain Reyes. I believe our peoples have much to learn from each other. As the formal negotiations began, Maya caught Eleanor's eye across the chamber. They had come so close to extinction, yet somehow had turned the greatest threat humanity had ever faced into the beginning of something new. The universe's nightmares were stepping onto the galactic stage, and they came not with fire and destruction, but with the most frightening weapon of all, new ideas. Ambassador, Miller called urgently from a communication station. The High Council is demanding an update and expressing extreme concern about the use of what they're calling aggressive technology. Talira's antennae twitched with irritation. Tell the Council that their concerns are noted and will be addressed once the immediate threat to our existence has been neutralized. Chen raised an eyebrow at this uncharacteristically sharp response. Political troubles. The Council has existed in philosophical debate for so long they've forgotten the reality beyond their chambers, Talira replied. But we don't have time for politics now. As predicted, the second wave of the attack came with adapted shielding. The disruption pulse was less effective, disabling only a portion of the advancing fleet. The Conclave ships moved forward, their weapons targeting the nodes of the planetary shield grid. Shield integrity at 87% and dropping, reported a Serenian technician, fear evident in her voice. We need more power to the disruption field, Riley said, working frantically at his console. If we could boost the output by redirecting energy from the Eastern Hemisphere grid, that would leave millions unprotected, objected a Serenian counselor. Not if we evacuate them first, Chen countered. How quickly can you move people from the eastern cities to the central sanctuary? Miller consulted his datapad. With all available transport, 3 hours minimum. We don't have 3 hours, Riley warned. Shield integrity now at 73%. Talira made a swift decision. Begin the evacuation. We'll hold as long as we can with the remaining power. The battle continued with increasing intensity. The humans' tactical expertise proved invaluable, as they constantly adjusted the defensive systems to counter each new attack strategy. The Serenians, for their part, contributed their unparalleled knowledge of energy manipulation, finding ways to maintain shields with minimal power and maximize the effectiveness of each disruption pulse. 6 hours into the battle, a new alert sounded. Incoming vessels, announced the sensor operator. But they're not Reapers or Conclave. Identification, Chen demanded. Zenith Alliance signatures, came the surprised response. 3 battle cruisers and support craft. The Zenith Alliance was a coalition of species from the galactic rim, typically neutral in council affairs. Their appearance here was unexpected and potentially game-changing. Open a channel, Talira ordered. The main screen activated to show the angular features of the Zenith commander. Serenian Prime, this is Commander Oryx of the Zenith Defense Force. We detected the attack on your system and have come to offer assistance. Your help is welcome. Commander, Talira replied, relief evident in her voice. But may I ask why? The Zenith Alliance has traditionally remained neutral in conflicts. Neutrality serves no one when facing existential threats, Ambassador Oryx responded. The Void Reapers attacked one of our outposts last month. We tracked their communications and discovered the Conclave's betrayal. Humanity is not your only ally in this fight. With the arrival of the Zenith forces, the tide of battle shifted. The combined fleet was able to push back the attackers, forcing them to retreat to the system's edge. They're regrouping, Riley observed. And look, more Conclave ships arriving. Reinforcements from the other defense points as well, Chen added, studying the tactical display. This is becoming a full-scale confrontation. Dr. Nakamura, who had been analyzing data from Serenian archives, suddenly looked up with excitement. Ambassador, I think I found something important. The Serenian research at Nova Haven. It wasn't just about quantum consciousness. They were developing a way to communicate directly with the organic components of the Reaper ships. To what end? Talira asked, puzzled. Based on these notes, they believe the organic parts of the Reaper vessels are not willing participants in the violence. They're essentially enslaved biological entities, forced to power the Reaper technology against their will. Talira's antennae straightened in shock. That would explain why the Conclave wanted Nova Haven destroyed first. If we could communicate with these entities, we might be able to disrupt the entire Reaper fleet from within. Nakamura finished. The research was nearly complete. The scientist in charge, Dr. Ayara, is she among the survivors? Niller quickly checked the evacuation records. Yes, she's currently aboard Medical Station 3. Get her here immediately, Talira ordered, and transfer all relevant research data to our central systems. As they waited for Dr. Ayara's arrival, the combined human, Serenian, and Zenith forces continued to hold the line against the growing enemy fleet. The shield grid was strained to its limits, power fluctuating dangerously across the defensive perimeter. Shield integrity at 42%, reported a technician. We cannot sustain another coordinated assault. Evacuation status, Chen asked. Eastern Hemisphere clear, Niller confirmed. Central Sanctuary at 87% capacity. Dr. Ayara arrived, a slender Serenian whose luminescence pulsed with nervous energy. She carried with her a small crystalline device. Ambassador, Captain, she greeted them hurriedly. I understand you need my research. Can you make it work? Talira asked without preamble. Can you communicate with the organic components of the Reaper ships? Iara hesitated. Theoretically, yes. We completed the communication protocol just days before the attack, but we never had a chance to test it. No time like the present, Riley remarked grimly, as another impact shook the command center. What do you need? Chen asked. Access to your quantum transmitters, Ayara replied, looking at the human technology. And a direct link to the shield grid. The communication requires enormous energy. It's why we developed it at Nova Haven near the quantum singularity. If we divert that much power from the shields, Riley began. We'll be defenseless, Talira finished. But if it works, it's our best chance, Chen agreed. Commander Riley, work with Dr. Ayara to integrate her device with our systems. Dr. Nakamura, assist with the biological interface. As the team worked feverishly to implement Ayara's research, the enemy launched their most coordinated attack yet. A massive Void Reaper dreadnought moved to the front of the formation, its dark matter cannon powering up for a devastating strike. All remaining power to forward shields, Riley ordered. The impact was catastrophic. Though the shields held, the power drain left other systems barely functioning. Warning signals blared throughout the command center as backup generators struggled to maintain life support. We're out of time, Chen stated. Dr. Ayara. Ready? The scientist confirmed, her hand steady on the crystalline device despite the chaos around her. But Ambassador, you should know, this requires a Serenian consciousness to serve as the bridge. The risk to that individual is significant. I'll do it, Talira said without hesitation. Ambassador, no, Niller objected. The Council would never. The Council isn't here. Talira cut him off with the same words she'd used at Nova Haven. This is my decision. Before anyone could object further, she placed her hands on the communication device. Dr. Ayara reluctantly guided her through the connection sequence, attaching neural interfaces to Talira's temples. Channel your consciousness through the crystal, Ayara instructed. Visualize it extending beyond yourself, reaching toward the Reaper ships. Talira closed her eyes, her luminescence brightening as she concentrated. The crystal between her hands began to pulse with energy, matching the rhythm of her bioluminescent patterns. Energy spike in the quantum transmitter, Riley reported. Signal broadcasting on all frequencies. For several tense moments, nothing seemed to happen. Then, astonishingly, the Void Reaper ships began to slow their advance. The massive dreadnought at the front of the formation stopped firing altogether. It's working, Nakamura whispered in awe. Talira's face was a mask of concentration, sweat beading on her brow as she maintained the connection. Through the neural link, she experienced something utterly alien. The collective consciousness of the organic components of the Reaper fleet. They were ancient beings, captured and enslaved millennia ago by the technological parasites that now control them. They're in pain, she gasped, her voice strained. Centuries of pain, forced to destroy, to consume. Can you help them break free? Chen asked urgently. Trying, but the control mechanisms, so deeply integrated. Talira's luminescence flickered dangerously as she pushed her consciousness deeper into the connection. On the tactical display, something unprecedented was happening. The Void Reaper ships were turning, not retreating, but rather orienting themselves toward the Tachyon Conclave vessels. They're targeting their allies, Riley said in disbelief. Not allies, Talira managed through gritted teeth. Masters. The Conclave. They created the Reapers, ancient weapons they couldn't control, locked away for millennia, until they found a way to direct them again. The revelation stunned everyone in the command center. The Tachyon Conclave, one of the oldest and most respected members of the Galactic Council, had been harboring this terrible secret for thousands of years. Why attack the Serenians now? Chen demanded. Your research, Talira replied, her consciousness still linked to the Reaper entities. Nova Haven was close, too close to freeing them. The Conclave couldn't risk exposure. The Void Reaper dreadnought fired on the lead Conclave vessel, its dark matter beam cutting through the ship shields like they didn't exist. Other Reaper ships followed suit, turning their weapons against their former masters. Ambassador, you need to break the connection, Ayara urged, monitoring Talira's life signs with growing concern. Your neural patterns are becoming unstable. Not yet, Talira insisted. They need direction, purpose beyond revenge. With an immense effort of will, Talira projected a new vision into the collective consciousness of the Reaper entities, not destruction, but liberation. Not vengeance, but justice. The path of peace that Serenians had followed for millennia, now offered to beings who had known only slavery and violence. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Reaper ships ceased their attack on the Conclave vessels, instead forming a protective ring around Serenity Prime. The dreadnought transmitted a message on all frequencies, not in any known language, but in pure emotional concepts that somehow translated themselves in the minds of all who heard. Freedom, gratitude, protection, justice. Talira finally released her grip on the communication device, collapsing into Chen's waiting arms. Her luminescence was dangerously dim, her breathing shallow. Medical team to the command center. Nakamura called out, already moving to Talira's side with emergency equipment. Did it work? Talira asked weakly. See for yourself, Chen replied gently, turning her toward the view screen. The tactical display showed the Conclave ships in full retreat, pursued by several Zenith vessels. The Void Reaper fleet, or rather, the newly liberated beings who had been forced to power those ships, maintained their protective formation around Serenity Prime. They've chosen to protect us, Niller said in wonder. After everything they were forced to do, they recognize a kindred spirit in the ambassador, Dr. Ayara observed, a being of peace who was willing to fight when necessary. As medical staff worked to stabilize Talira, the command center received an urgent communication from Earth. The main screen activated to show President Adeyemi. Captain Chen. Commander Riley, the president greeted them. We've received your updates. Earth battle groups will arrive within the hour, but it seems the immediate crisis has been resolved in a most unexpected manner. That's putting it mildly, Madam President, Chen replied. The situation has evolved beyond anything we anticipated. So I see, Adeyemi nodded, studying the tactical data. And the Tachyon Conclave's betrayal. This will reshape the political landscape of the entire Galactic Council. If the Council survives at all, Riley suggested, their credibility has been severely compromised. Perhaps that's not entirely a bad thing, came Talira's voice, weak but determined as she insisted on joining the conversation. The Council has been stagnant for too long, clinging to outdated philosophies and ignoring uncomfortable truths. Ambassador Vesh, President Adeyemi acknowledged with respect. On behalf of Earth, let me express our admiration for your courage today. You've demonstrated the true meaning of leadership. I simply did what was necessary, Talira replied. As did humanity when you came to our aid without hesitation. My people have long preached peace without truly understanding what it requires, the readiness to stand against those who would destroy it, the courage to protect what matters most. And what happens now? Adeyemi asked. With the Reapers transformed and the conclave exposed, Talira straightened despite her weakness, her luminescence strengthening with conviction. Now we build something new. Not just a defensive alliance, but a true partnership between our peoples. The Serenians bring 5 millennia of philosophical insight and technological innovation. Humanity brings courage, adaptability, and a fierce protective instinct. Together, with the Zenith Alliance and others who share our vision, we can create what the Council always claimed to be but never truly was, guardians of peace for all species. 1 year later, Talira stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Guardian Station, watching as ships from dozens of species arrived for the inaugural assembly. The massive space platform occupied the previously contested border between Serenian and human territory, now a symbol of their unprecedented alliance. Quite a turnout, Captain Chen, now Admiral Chen, observed, joining her at the viewport. 37 species have confirmed participation. More than I dared hope for, Talira admitted, though I noticed the remaining conclave worlds declined our invitation. They have other concerns at the moment, Chen replied with a hint of satisfaction. The tribunal examining their role in the Reaper conspiracy continues to uncover disturbing evidence. The former Void Reapers, now calling themselves the Liberated, had been integrated into the new alliance as well. Their unique organic technological ships now served as Peacekeepers, their ancient knowledge providing insights into forgotten corners of the galaxy. The Council hardliners on my world still protest our abandonment of traditional values, Talira noted as they walked toward the assembly chamber. They claim we've compromised our peaceful nature by aligning with warriors. And what do you tell them? Chen asked. That they fundamentally misunderstand peace, Talira replied. Peace isn't passive acceptance or philosophical detachment. It's an active state that must be created and protected, sometimes with words, sometimes with shields, and yes, sometimes with weapons. Ambassador Vesh, Admiral Chen, Commander Oryx of the Zenith Alliance greeted them as they entered the Grand Chamber. The assembly awaits your opening address. Talira took a moment to survey the gathered representatives. Humans in their crisp uniforms, Serenians with their gossamer wings, Zenith with their angular features, and dozens of other species, each bringing their own strengths and perspectives to this new coalition. As she stepped to the central platform, Talira felt the weight of history on her shoulders. 5,000 years of Serenian tradition had been transformed in a single year. not abandoned, but evolved into something stronger, more resilient, more meaningful. Representatives of the Guardian Accord, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We gather today not as conquerors or competitors, but as protectors of a shared ideal, that all beings deserve to live in peace, to explore their potential, to create and grow without fear. For too long, my people believed that peace could exist without protection, that harmony would naturally arise if only we demonstrated it ourselves. We were wrong. Peace requires guardians, beings willing to stand against those who would destroy it, to fight when necessary so that others need not fight at all. She gestured toward the human delegation, her luminescence brightening with emotion. Humanity taught us this lesson when they came to our aid without hesitation, risking their lives for strangers because it was right. They showed us that the capacity for protection and the capacity for creation come from the same source, a deep commitment to life and its possibilities. Admiral Chen stepped forward to join her. And the Serenians taught us that strength without wisdom leads nowhere worth going, she added. That protection without compassion becomes mere domination. Together, we are stronger than either of us could be alone. Talira raised her hands in the traditional Serenian blessing. Let this Guardian Accord be a new beginning for our galaxy, not peace through philosophical detachment, nor security through military might alone, but rather protection through partnership, the wisdom to know what matters, and the strength to defend it. As representatives from dozens of worlds stood to signal their commitment to the new alliance, Talira exchanged a glance with Chen. They had come so far since that first tense meeting at Harmony Station, from suspicion to respect, from alliance to true friendship. You know, Chen said quietly as the assembly erupted in supportive sounds from a dozen different species, for all our differences, humans and Serenians want the same thing. A universe where creation thrives, Talira agreed, where beauty and knowledge can flourish without fear. Worth fighting for, Chen added. Worth protecting, Talira corrected gently, which sometimes requires fighting, yes, but always for the right reasons. Outside the station's viewports, ships from Earth and Serenity Prime maintained their joint patrol, a powerful symbol of the alliance that had changed the galaxy's balance of power. Not through conquest or domination, but through the recognition that true peace required both wisdom and strength, both compassion and resolve. The galaxy's most peaceful species had not abandoned their principles. They had found the means to truly fulfill them. And humanity, often feared for their capacity for violence, had found allies who understood that protection was the noblest expression of that capacity. Together, they had become what neither could be alone: guardians of peace.